To start your cherry blossoms, you need a tree branch. So I start with a very skinny, diagonal, bumpy line using a crayon. If you have an oil pastel, that works too. You can see I double up near one edge to make it look thicker because, look at the branches in your neighborhood. Check out the edges. The ones near the end are much thinner than the ones towards your trunk. I don't know if I said that very well, but I'm gandering, you get the idea. Make a bunch of little baby branches off that too, because you want to see cherry blossoms all over this page. And to see cherry blossoms, you need branches first. Now it's time to watercolor. This is going to be difficult. So get ready. Notice the first thing I did. Fill your palette or a piece of wax paper with water, and you're gonna add paint to the water. This is gonna dilute the pigment. It's gonna make it much thinner. You can actually mix colors this way too. Notice I added a little bit of magenta to give it more of a pinkish hue. I'm doing this because I do not want my cherry blossoms to be too bright. I want them to be super light, and the way to do that is to add water. Notice how I tapped my paper towel. That's a really important step. Then you're gonna make the tiniest little petal. And I'm gonna zoom in a moment, but I want you to notice how I do it in two parts. From the top of the petal to the center of the petal. I'm also totally into doing petals in the air. So it looks kind of like a pair of parentheses. And then will you notice that where my brush stops is where the darkest pigment or color ends up. So the pattern here that I want you to think of is dip your paint, tap it on your paper towel, and then make your petals, always starting from the tip to the center. Tip to the center. And every time your brush leaves the page, it's the darkest spot right before you lift it up. I'll zoom in so you can see this a little better. Also though, before I do that, notice, have I gotten more paint yet? I have not. A little goes a long way. You can always darken them. If you find that you have big puddles, that means you need to tap your paper towel a bit more. If you notice that your petals are all like smooshy blobs, you might be pressing your brush down too hard. This is a very gentle exercise. And also, I know there's so much to notice. This is a lot of information. Notice how my petals are not touching. You want to give your petals a little bit of room because watercolor spreads fairly easily. And don't be shy about moving your paper the way you need to make those petals, okay? If you need to pause and watch this part again, go for it, but I'm going to slow it down a bit and zoom in so you can see things a little better. Okay, so let's see. I have dipped and I have tapped, and now I'm making my tiny parentheses kind of shape. It's like a teardrop or a really round diamond. See that there? It's small, gentle strokes using the very tip of your brush. Can you see the detail now? I'm not letting the petals touch, and every time the darkest spot of the paint is where the brush last touches the page. So every time I lift my brush, that spot should be the darkest spot. That's what I was trying to say before. Keep in mind, this is hard to do, but you can do it if you practice. So I recommend before you start your final cherry blossoms, get a scrap piece of paper and just practice those 2 strokes with your brush, that top to bottom, gentle curve stroke with the right amount of paint/water on your brush, because it's that Goldilocks zone, that Goldilocks amount that's going to be the right fit, and you won't know until you try. So I recommend trying on a practice sheet first. So once my cherry blossoms are done, it's time to move on to the sky. We are going to mix a very light blue, so you're gonna need a lot of water in a different part of your palette. Now remember, if you don't have a paint palette, you can use tin foil or wax paper. I like to mix the perfect shade of blue for me, and the perfect shade of blue for me will be a different shade of blue for you. It's all good as long as it is super duper light, okay? And to make it light, you have to add more water. You don't want anything distracting from those glorious cherry blossoms, which you have definitely let dry before you put on the sky. Didn't mean to rhyme. Anyways, let's look at how I put this on sideways and gently, barely touching those petals of my cherry blossoms. If you do touch them, you may reactivate the paint and sploosh, you're gonna get a smudge. So be careful, get close, but don't touch. Let's speed this up and see how it goes. Remember, my big tip here, once you start that sky, finish it. Work quickly, focus. Don't stop, because then you'll get a lot more variation in the color. Awesome. Now that the sky is done, let it dry, and you're going to use your paper towel to wipe clean your paint palette. Then you need a thin black Sharpie or a thin black marker. Just make sure that your background painting is dry. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to add the center of our cherry blossoms. And that is going to look like a really teeny weeny firework right in the center of your cherry blossom. So there's going to be as many lines as there are petals, and I will show you what this looks like by zooming in. Alrighty, last step. Grab a red marker or Sharpie, doesn't matter, and you're gonna be adding a little red tip to the end of those little black lines. I'll zoom in so you can see what that looks like close up. And that's it. You are all done. It's worth the hard work and effort, my friends. Hope you had fun.